So now going back to what you do now as a data scientist, can you go a
Mhm.
little bit detail of what you do there?
Yeah. Well, I can't really go into detail. I can
Hmm.
speak broadly. Um, I'm just thinking about the Westeros map. I'm gonna have to look that up or ask you to send that to me. Yeah. So day to day, I mean, at a high level, what I do is, you know, try to answer questions that are frequently asked in a programmatic way that typically from like the existing staff of data analysts on the team, they don't really have a lot of like programming experience or like modern day data analytics skill sets. And so sometimes these questions that get asked of our department are pretty heavy, they're pretty involved, and that can take somebody, hours, maybe a day. What I think that I excel at is breaking down these asks, breaking down these queries, and starting at the source. What kind of data do we need? What kind of manipulation do we need to apply? What kind of output are we expecting? And through a matter of QA and QC, automating that process step by step, and then eventually turning that into a script and then a batch file, and then just having it run on a local machine or server every day or wherever, whatever it needs to be run at cadence wise. So that's day to day. I mean, at a broad level, what I do, a lot of that does involve geospatial data, maps. A lot of people ask for maps. And one thing I'm trying to bring our department into like the 21st century with is the use of WebGIS and online mapping. It's hard to break out of that feeling of having a paper product in your hand, and you get to physically look at where the points are on the map, and everyone just wants to see those dots on the map. And then people here also really like the heat map. They want to see more or less or that sort of thing. But I'm really trying to bring the next level to the game and bring that element of dynamic mapping through WebGIS. Some of the other things that I've done specifically that like are public and that I can talk about, because there's YouTube videos on the Minneapolis City Council website. So one thing I did last summer was we were looking into some of the relationships to like gun violence and narcotic use throughout the city. And one tool set that exists in the ArcGIS online platform, or not online, but just ArcGIS, is geographic weighted regression. And that's something that we really looked at and learned and studied and broke it down step by step in the program at the University of Arizona. So I felt pretty comfortable asking these questions, answering these questions in a more modern data science approach. And what I found was that of the 80 or so neighborhoods that are populated, because there are some that are just industrial, of the 80 or so neighborhoods in Minneapolis, the ones with the highest concentration of gun violence also tended to have some of the higher concentrations of fentanyl specifically being recovered, or at least just known about in those areas. And what furthermore was really interesting to me was looking at like the population factors and looking at these spatial correlations to where we're seeing gun violence in these neighborhoods versus these population buckets of 0 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 15 aged individuals and citizens of Minneapolis. And so that was really concerning. And it was something that I felt, it's hard to say, it's like, I don't want to say I'm proud of that, but like I'm proud that I was able to uncover it and bring it up and bring that forward to city council and say, hey, look, these are some correlations I'm noticing at a geographic and spatial level. You know, again, not up for me to decide any kind of like policy or make any kind of changes, but at least I get to put that discussion on the table and bring that forth to the people who can maybe make some changes and some policy changes. Yeah, I guess that's probably the most I can speak about at a detailed level of what I do as a geospatial data scientist.
So you are very passionate about using geospatial data to bring to light real world problems beyond what you even had just mentioned. So why is that important to you?
Yeah, I think to me geography puts things in a very accessible perspective. Not everyone maybe knows how to use a map in terms of using a scale bar, orientation, that sort of thing, thinking back to the Boy Scout days. But I would make the contention that nearly everyone can intuitively read a map, and that if you were shown where you are in a location and you have some semblance of familiarity with the city, with the town location you happen to be in, I think most people can figure out more or less where they are. And I think GIS and geography brings a really cool approach in just that quick, I can see some phenomena here in relation to where I am in space, and I can see the change or the difference or what have you here. And I think Minneapolis is a really interesting example of that. And I'm sure most cities are as well, where it's really a block by block thing. You go downtown Minneapolis, and one block, 6th Street, for example, might be hopping. There's restaurants and bars and hotels, and everyone's walking to and fro. And then you just go a block over to 7th, and it's not the same. There's just nothing there. It's almost garage and parking ramp exits and entries, and people just aren't walking the same. It's not being utilized the same. So I think geography, like in that sense, is interesting, and that people can just see that pretty intuitively. And sometimes it's not always easy to be on the ground and see that all the time. But if we can make maps about it and talk about it, I think it's pretty accessible for the most part.